My ex-wife, Angela, cheated on me and walked out on our family years ago. Now she was suddenly back, standing at my door with another man's child, wanting to be a family again. I slammed the door in her face. Let me give you some background. Angela, now 36, and I, 37, met in our mid-20s. I was around 24 when we first started working at the same company. That's how we met. After dating for 2 years, we tied the knot, and within 3 years of being married, we had 2 daughters, now aged 9 and 7. Our second daughter was a surprise, and Angela wasn't thrilled about the pregnancy. She considered terminating it, but eventually chose to keep the baby, even though I told her it was completely her choice and I'd support whatever she wanted. After our first daughter was born, life was still pretty good. We were happy, in love, and things felt solid, but everything shifted after she got pregnant again. Angela grew distant, moody, and easily irritated. She often snapped at me or our eldest daughter. I assumed it was hormones and tried to adapt, thinking this new version of Angela was temporary. We both hoped she'd bounce back eventually, but instead, things spiraled further downhill. My daughter and I began tiptoeing around her moods, like walking on eggshells. I took over everything: cooking, cleaning, errands, even though Angela had quit her job on her own after our first child and was meant to be a stay-at-home mom. Initially, she did handle most of the house stuff and took care of our eldest while I worked full-time. But after she got pregnant again, she said she was too exhausted to manage anything and insisted we get a housekeeper. I hesitated, since we were already stretching our budget and my salary wasn't anything special, but I caved because I didn't want to stress her out during the pregnancy. I figured things would go back to normal once the baby was born, that Angela would pick things up again during the day, take care of the house, look after the kids. But months passed and nothing changed. She stayed just as irritable and disengaged. She refused to do any chores and spent all day glued to the TV. She didn't even interact with our daughters much. She'd occasionally pay the neighbor to take them to the park, but that was about it. I'm not trying to sound bitter, but I couldn't help feeling that way. I was burning the candle at both ends, working long hours and still helping out at home, while she barely lifted a finger. And it wasn't just the emotional strain. We were hemorrhaging money paying for the housekeeper to cook, clean, and handle other tasks. Meanwhile, I was juggling all our other bills and trying to build some savings for our kids' future. But Angela wouldn't budge. She made no effort to pitch in, financially or otherwise. About 6 months after our second daughter was born, I finally decided I couldn't keep doing this. I needed to talk to her. I asked my parents to take care of the girls for the day, and they agreed. That afternoon, I sat Angela down and told her I understood that she'd been through a lot with the pregnancies, but I really needed her to meet me halfway. I told her the cost of the housekeeper was becoming unsustainable and asked her to honor her original plan. Get back to doing at least some of the daily household work so we could cut the housekeeper's hours and save money. She instantly shut it down, said she was too overwhelmed with the kids to do anything else, and if I wasn't earning enough to cover everything, that was my failure, not hers. She told me to stop using her as a scapegoat and step up as the so-called man of the house. Her logic was baffling. She twisted everything around and made it sound like I was insane for thinking she should contribute at all, as if I was unreasonable for asking her to share the responsibilities. The conversation quickly turned into a full-blown argument. She called me a pathetic man who couldn't afford to be married to someone like her. I snapped back and called her a lazy mother, pointing out how afraid our older daughter had become around her. I told her she was failing both as a mom and a wife. That comment hit a nerve. She shoved me hard. I lost my footing and fell back onto the coffee table, shattering the glass and hurting myself badly. I had to be taken to the emergency room. Angela was sobbing the whole time, apologizing over and over again. Fortunately, my injuries weren't too severe, just bruises and surface wounds. But it could have been worse. After that incident, I realized I didn't feel safe around her. I told her she needed to leave. I couldn't trust her around our children anymore. What if she lost control around them next? I asked my parents to take care of our daughters until Angela was out of the house. She spent a week begging me to let her stay, promising it would never happen again. But I couldn't risk it. I almost filed for divorce right then, but she pleaded for another chance. In the end, we agreed she'd go live with her parents and begin therapy. She promised to get professional help and only come back once she had a clean bill of health from a doctor. Clearly, something was wrong with her. People who are truly happy don't act like that. But she said she wanted to get better, and I didn't want my daughters growing up without a mom. So I held off on the divorce and gave our marriage one last shot. Because she exploded, accusing me of spying on her through the housekeeper. She launched into a furious rant, saying she'd had enough, that she was tired of being bossed around by me and forced to handle everything while I supposedly just sat at a desk for a few hours a day. She claimed everything was my fault, that I was pathetic for needing to beg her for help, and that as the man of the house, it was shameful I couldn't even afford a cleaner. It was all completely irrational. She was reaching for anything to make herself look like the victim and paint me as unreasonable for simply asking her to contribute. We ended up in a huge argument. She called me a loser who didn't deserve a woman like her, and I snapped back, calling her a lazy slob who had already failed at being a decent mother, especially considering how scared our eldest daughter was of her. I told her she was now failing as a wife, too. That hit a nerve. She shoved me hard. I lost my footing and fell back into the coffee table, shattering the glass and seriously injuring myself. I had to be rushed to the ER. She kept crying and apologizing the whole time, but the damage was done. Luckily, it was just my back that got hurt. Nothing too deep, just painful surface wounds. But it could have been far worse. That was when I realized I couldn't trust Angela anymore. Not around me, and especially not around our kids. I told her she needed to leave. I didn't feel safe having her in the house, and I sure as hell didn't feel safe letting her be alone with our daughters. I asked my parents to take care of the girls temporarily. For an entire week, Angela begged and pleaded, swearing it would never happen again. But I'd made up my mind. I didn't believe her. I nearly filed for divorce right then and there. But she got down on her knees, begging for one last shot. Eventually, we agreed that she would move in with her parents for a while and start therapy. I told her she could only come back after a doctor or therapist gave her a clean bill of mental health. Clearly, something was deeply wrong. Happy, stable people don't behave the way she did. But she said she was willing to get help and try to get better. And honestly, I didn't want my daughters to grow up without their mother. So I decided to hold off on filing for divorce and give our marriage one last chance. While living apart, we started going to marriage counseling. Things were rough, but they seemed to improve over time. My parents moved in to help with the girls, and Angela stayed with her parents. I stayed in regular contact with her therapist, who explained that Angela had been diagnosed with postpartum depression. Her anger issues were part of that, apparently, symptoms she'd never experienced before. The incident with the shove had been a huge wake-up call. According to the therapist, she was making progress. We continued like that for about a year. Around the 6-month mark, I even allowed Angela to visit the girls. Under my supervision, of course. Slowly but surely, she began to resemble the person I married. I started to feel hopeful again, thinking maybe we'd actually make it work this time. Then, out of nowhere, she stopped coming to our counseling sessions. No warning, no explanation. She also stopped answering my calls and texts. I was confused, but her therapist kept assuring me she was doing fine and still working through things. That only made her sudden distance even more baffling. I kept reaching out, trying to get her to talk to me, but she kept brushing me off and saying she just needed space. After nearly 3 months of being ignored, I finally decided enough was enough. I went to her parents' house. I hadn't visited earlier because they didn't like me. They blamed me for Angela's breakdown and believed I was the reason she lost control. Angela told me herself that it was best if I stayed away to avoid unnecessary drama. And at the time, I respected that. But now, I had questions that needed answers. I went anyway. She'd been dodging our counseling sessions, barely speaking to me when she did show up, and acting completely disinterested in everything. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to know what was really going on. When I got to the house and asked her parents where she was, they flat out refused to tell me. Then they slammed the door in my face. I could see the satisfaction on their faces, like they were enjoying keeping me in the dark. My gut told me something was off, and I couldn't let it go. So I walked around to the backyard. I knew they often left the kitchen door unlocked, thinking maybe I could slip in and talk to her directly. But I didn't need to go that far. That's when I saw her, Angela, sitting on the swing set in the backyard, with her back to me, making out with some guy I didn't recognize. I hadn't seen them in years, but that image is burned into my brain. It was the most gut-wrenching moment of my life. As soon as the guy noticed me, he jumped back. Angela turned around a second later, but by then I was already walking toward my car. She chased me, trying to stop me, but I wasn't listening. I was numb, shocked. She tried to touch my arm, and I shook her off, telling her not to lay a hand on me. I got in my car and drove away. The moment I got home, I blocked her number everywhere so she couldn't reach me. Then I called my parents and told them what had happened. I asked them to help me find a good divorce lawyer because I was done. However, I could sense from her behavior that there was definitely something she wasn't telling me. On the day I decided to visit her parents' house, I thought she'd be home, but she wasn't. When I asked her parents where she was, they coldly informed me they weren't permitted to tell me and slammed the door in my face. It was obvious they enjoyed doing that, which only increased my anxiety. Standing outside their house, I repeatedly tried calling Angela, but she didn't answer. With my paranoia rising by the second, I decided to sneak around the property and find a way inside. I walked around to the back since I remembered her parents typically left the kitchen door unlocked. But I didn't even need to reach that door because I spotted Angela sitting on the swing in their backyard. Unfortunately, her back was turned to me because she was kissing a man I didn't recognize. Even though it's been a long time since that day, the memory is permanently etched into my mind. It was the most painful moment of my life, something I still haven't managed to forget. The guy she was kissing pulled away abruptly when he noticed me. By the time Angela turned around, I was already heading back toward my car. She caught up to me and tried to stop me, but I couldn't hear a word she was saying. I was in shock. She tried to grab my arm, but I shook her off and told her firmly not to touch me. She backed away, and I got into my car and drove home. Once I got there, I immediately blocked her on everything, so she'd have no opportunity to explain herself. I told my parents what I'd just witnessed at Angela's parents' house, and asked them to help find a lawyer for me. I didn't hear or see Angela again until we had to meet with the court-appointed mediator to finalize our divorce agreement. By that point, I had pretty much become robotic, simply functioning for my daughter's sake, but emotionally numb. I felt nothing, even when I learned Angela had decided to terminate her parental rights because she didn't want to stay with us anymore. Instead, she wanted to be with the guy, I'll call him Sean, that I'd seen her kissing that day. He was someone she had known since childhood, and although they'd drifted apart after high school, they'd recently reconnected after she moved back to her parents' place, and she supposedly fell for him. Her parents supported this completely, which explained why they felt comfortable letting her openly kiss Sean in their yard, even though she was married with 2 kids. Apparently, they'd always hoped Angela would end up with Sean, and they celebrated her decision to finally put herself and her own happiness first, as if she'd ever done otherwise. The divorce was a drawn-out process because despite her infidelity, Angela still tried to claim alimony. It took a long time, but my lawyer and I fought hard and ensured she received nothing from the settlement. It was fair, since I'd been the one covering all expenses for so many years, while she had done nothing but watch TV at home. It has now been 5 years since the divorce was finalized, and we succeeded in our goal of ensuring she left empty-handed. Those months during the divorce were among the toughest I've ever experienced, but I knew I couldn't break down. I had my daughters to care for, and they depended on me. My parents were incredibly helpful and supportive throughout everything, and I can never thank them enough for their unwavering assistance as I balanced work and caring for my girls. Now that 5 years have passed, even though back then the divorce felt like the worst thing that could ever happen, I'm genuinely grateful for it today. I don't believe I'd be in the position I'm in right now if I hadn't made the decision to leave Angela. Life has treated me remarkably well since then, and in every aspect, I'm in a far better place now. We've since moved into a larger home since my income has increased significantly, and I no longer have to spend money on anyone except myself and my girls. My parents live nearby and visit us often. I have friends who genuinely care about me, and my daughters are incredibly happy and thriving. That's really all a man could ever want, and I'm deeply thankful to the universe for blessing me with such a positive outcome. Now, everything was going smoothly until Angela showed up again a few days ago. The kids were at school, and I was just about to head out for work. As I opened the doorbell rang, and there stood Angela with a little boy beside her. He couldn't have been more than 3 or 4 years old, and I instantly knew he had to be her son. I was completely caught off guard by Angela's sudden appearance at my doorstep, and was still trying to make sense of it when she burst into tears. She told me she had come to apologize and set things right between us, saying she was finally ready to be a family again and wanted to give our marriage another try. I couldn't believe she was standing there after all these years, acting as if she had the authority to decide whether we could reconcile or not. Within moments, I made up my mind and shut the door, refusing to let her in. Before closing it completely, I firmly told her this wasn't her family anymore. I had stopped being her husband the day she cheated on me with Sean. Our divorce was simply a legal formality, and since she'd given up custody of our daughters, she no longer had any right to call us her family. After making myself clear, I shut the door firmly, telling her to leave because I didn't want her anywhere near my home. Honestly, I wanted to yell at her. I was so furious, but I held myself back because the little boy was there. For a few minutes after I shut the door, I could still hear Angela crying loudly outside. Eventually, I decided to ignore it, waited until she was gone, and then left for work. Throughout the day, I did my best not to think about her sudden appearance because I knew it would weaken my resolve, and I couldn't afford to let that happen. For the most part, I managed to push her from my mind, but the moment I got home from work, my parents called, demanding to know why I'd turned Angela away. They told me Angela had called them right after I shut the door in her face, and she had been devastated. It turned out my parents had given Angela my new address and had encouraged her to visit me. Apparently, she was in the process of divorcing Sean, and this was finally her chance to fix things with me. My parents said Angela had reached out to them about a month earlier, and they'd been planning this ever since. My parents insisted it was time I started thinking about my kids because my daughters needed their mother, and in their eyes, Angela was the best mother possible. They had decided she deserved another opportunity, and even coached her on what to say. This made me extremely angry because it wasn't their place to forgive Angela and grant her another chance without even consulting me first. What if the kids had been home when Angela arrived? It was incredibly reckless of them to do something like this. I expressed my anger, but they refused to admit they were wrong. They reminded me how much they'd helped during my divorce by caring for the kids, and since they still watched them occasionally, they felt they had just as much right as I did to decide what was best for them. To me, it was absurd for them to believe that. After all, my daughters were mine, not theirs. Even though I respected my parents deeply and would forever be grateful for all they had done for me during my divorce, I felt they had crossed a line by bringing Angela back into my life. We argued, and they accused me of being selfish and unreasonable for refusing to give Angela another chance. They insisted they'd carefully considered everything and were convinced she had changed and deserved to be in our daughters' lives again. When I reminded them Angela had voluntarily signed away her rights, they became offended, saying it was insulting I thought they'd ever put me or my daughters in harm's way. They went further, accusing me of ruining my daughters' lives by being too proud to admit they needed their mother. Several days have passed now, and I've thought this over carefully. Honestly, I don't believe I was selfish or wrong. Am I truly wrong for not giving my ex-wife another chance to be a mother? Since Angela appeared at my doorstep with her son, I've uncovered the disturbing truth about her involvement with my parents. It's honestly so shocking that I'm not even sure where to start, and I'm still having trouble processing everything. It's mind-blowing how each of them betrayed me without any hesitation. Apparently, not only did my parents give Angela my new address, but they had also been secretly keeping in touch with her all these years. I'd completely cut her out after the divorce, but they hadn't, believing that she'd eventually change her mind. They weren't talking regularly, maybe once a month at most, but even that felt like a deep betrayal to me. Sean had convinced Angela to sign away her parental rights after receiving the divorce papers. He gave her an ultimatum. She could either abandon her family and start fresh with him, or maintain contact with her kids and fight for custody, which would mean leaving him behind. According to my parents, this was a tough choice for Angela, but she eventually decided to build a new life with Sean instead of sticking by the family she already had. Shortly after I filed for divorce, Angela secretly reached out to my parents. She explained her situation and asked for their help, wanting to keep some contact with our daughters privately. Angela told them she felt trapped between Sean and me. She knew either way she'd lose her kids. If she chose me, I'd fight for full custody with supervised visitation. But if she went against Sean's wishes and pursued custody, she'd likely lose both him and the kids. Given the circumstances of our divorce and her history of temper issues, her odds of getting partial custody were low. Fighting seemed pointless and could have ended with her losing everything. That's when my parents stepped in. Angela met them secretly, and pleaded with them to help her remain in contact with the kids by acting as intermediaries. She knew that once she gave up her parental rights, she would have no visitation whatsoever. However, my parents had visitation privileges and planned to exploit this. They successfully deceived me for years by secretly letting Angela meet with my daughters. They rationalized this betrayal because Angela's story deeply affected them, and they felt morally obligated not to separate a mother from her children. Stabbing their own son in the back for years, though, never seemed to trouble their conscience. My parents confessed that whenever I dropped my daughters off at their house, they would invite Angela over so she could spend time with them. My daughters never told me about seeing their mother because my parents bribed them with toys and candy to keep quiet. Whenever I asked my girls about their time at their grandparents', they would say they'd played games with their grandparents and a friend. I always assumed they meant my parents' actual friends, people I knew well. However, it turns out that friend was what my parents instructed my daughters to call their mother in case I ever asked about their visits. I was devastated to learn my daughters had been keeping secrets from me too, but I couldn't hold it against them. They're just children, and they'd clearly been manipulated and intimidated by Angela and my parents into silence. When I confronted them after discovering the truth from my parents, both girls burst into tears. They said they couldn't tell me because they'd been warned they'd face punishment from God if they revealed anything. Angela and my parents had obviously drilled into their minds the dire consequences of telling me the truth, which explained why they'd been so secretive and vague. I felt like an awful father for never questioning exactly who my daughters were spending time with at my parents' house. It could just as easily have been someone else, someone far more dangerous than Angela, and I never would have known. But I'm determined to end this now. I'm in the process of getting a restraining order against all of them. Fortunately, I already have written proof, since my parents sent me an email detailing the entire situation a few days after our fight. They believed this email would help me see just how desperately Angela wanted to stay connected to her daughters without losing Sean, the supposed love of her life. They thought this would somehow make me forgive everyone involved, but all it did was make me realize that everyone here was just a deceitful liar, and I couldn't trust anyone anymore. It's also ironic that Angela willingly signed away her parental rights and had to resort to secretly meeting our children, as if it were illegal, all because Sean didn't want her involved with her previous family. He was supposedly her true love, yet now they were getting divorced, making all her earlier decisions meaningless. They even had a son together, but according to my parents, Sean now wanted nothing to do with Angela or their child. He had received a new job offer and planned on relocating within a couple of months. Angela had recently started working again, and their son had just begun kindergarten, so she didn't want to move, leading to constant fights between them. It all reached a breaking point 3 months ago when Sean informed her that he was done. He was taking the new job and leaving. He no longer had any desire to play the role of a family man, as it meant sacrificing his own ambitions and happiness for her, something he wasn't willing to do. This revelation was intended to make me feel sympathy for Angela, but all it did was give me a sense of justice finally being served. I have already talked with my lawyer, and the restraining orders have been officially filed. My daughters and I have also had a very open discussion about everything that happened. I explained clearly that moving forward, they won't see their grandparents or their mother ever again. For now, they seem to be handling this news reasonably well. Regardless, we're still going to attend therapy sessions to work through all this, because I'm certain it has been incredibly difficult for them, likely more so than I realized over these past 5 years. But from now on, it ends here. Hey everyone, thank you all so much for your concern and support. I'm incredibly grateful that so many people have sent kind messages and blessings for my daughters. My parents and Angela have officially received the restraining orders, and they're scheduled to appear in court in a few days. I'm not sure how they're feeling about this, as I've blocked them on every possible platform. I've also instructed my friends to avoid communicating with them in case they try reaching out. Additionally, I've improved the security around my home and have been working remotely for the past couple of days. I've spoken directly with my daughter's school administrators and informed them about the situation as well. Initially, I considered keeping the girls home for a few days, but I didn't want their education to be affected by Angela and my parents' actions. Therefore, the teachers have been instructed to carefully monitor them and not allow anyone besides me to pick them up after school. I'm doing absolutely everything possible to ensure that Angela and my parents can't reach us, as I have no doubt they'll attempt something eventually. So far, everything has been calm, and I'm hopeful that after the restraining order is finalized, they'll keep their distance for good. Hi, this is just going to be a brief update, but we successfully obtained the restraining order. For the next 5 years, those 3 individuals must stay far away from me and my daughters or face severe consequences. Obviously, I plan on keeping all current security measures active for some time, as they looked extremely upset the last time I saw them, and I don't want to take any risks. My daughters and I are regularly attending family counseling sessions, and I believe we're going to make significant progress in the coming months. We've already seen noticeable improvements. Right now, my only priority is making sure my daughters are happy. That's all that matters to me. Please continue to send your positive thoughts and well wishes our way. We truly need them.